right, we'll give it a minute here, and then I'll let these guys kick it off.
Can everybody see the screen titled Performance Appraisals?
Yeah, I'm seeing the presenter view, so I can see like this slide and next slide though. There you go.
There
Yeah,
you go.
that looks
Perfect.
nice.
Thank you.
It was just a teaser.
You guys can take it away.
All right. So I think we can do some quick introductions, and I think I have the first slide, but I'm Brandon Flaherty. I'm a nurse by background. It's always interesting to see my name next to IT manager for multiple reasons, but happy to just be here and share some of my perspectives with you guys today. And I've got two other way smarter, better looking people with me to help present today.
I'm Molly Reed. I work in human resources. I will be working alongside Missy and Brandon. And the reason I am here today is because I am the person to blame for everything performance appraisals at Nebraska Medicine. I help facilitate the process. We have a very large project team across many areas in the organization, but I do facilitate and launch it and support the team that answers all the questions. Happy to be here today.
I'm Missy Kneifel. I am one of the inpatient nursing managers. I work in the Warner Tower. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present today. I've worked with Molly as part of the work group for the last couple of years on the performance appraisals.
All right, so just to kind of preface, I think as we were putting this presentation together, we had some interesting conversations about why this group was curious about performance appraisals. So I'll try to put the story behind me there, but I do want you to know that we're just here to share maybe some of our experience, some of what we do when we're doing performance appraisals and the guidance we've given to our teams. As you're reading this slide, why we do performance appraisals, we really want as an organization to create a pathway for fairness and transparency and development. There's some opportunity for identifying goals and giving feedback. But hopefully, you know, by the end of this, you have some ideas. But what I really want you to know is that it's cool that you care about performance and the value you're adding to the organization. And if you have any ideas that come from this that you want to talk to your supervisor, or maybe you're a manager or supervisor yourself and you want to talk to your team, I would just encourage you to do that. Performance to me has always got to involve some conversation. So just as we're going through this, you know, maybe that's what you take away is how can I work with my supervisor to create standards for my team, or even just to ask the question of how am I doing? Because if those conversations don't happen before the performance appraisal, it's kind of too late, right? So just wanted to get that out there as we go through this, and hopefully you'll get some ideas throughout the presentation. So we wanted to start with why performance appraisals, and then if we go to the next slide, we really thought this conversation kind of begins with yourself, right? How do you prepare as you're thinking about your performance and, you know, the past year and kind of putting together your appraisal? So to me, it really involves some introspection or some self-awareness. You've got to really think back, reflect, and actually make time to look at the things that you accomplished, maybe some things that you could have done better. And then just, you know, as you're going into this process, stay curious, right? Because everybody's perspective is going to be different, right? So I tend to keep track of all the things I did well, but the things I did bad, I think I subconsciously forget, right? I don't know if you guys do that too, but I would just say, just know that you're going to have a different perspective from your peer appraisals and your manager appraisals. So stay curious, because you're going to get better either way. And then this is a John Maxwell quote that I love, that reflection turns experience into insight. So even if you're reflecting on something and maybe it didn't go so well, oftentimes those are the best opportunities to develop a goal or something you want to do better the next year. So don't forget about the things that maybe didn't go 100% as planned or didn't turn out with perfect outcomes. The next step as you're going through kind of the self-appraisal is really trying to get the data, right, as you're reflecting and kind of thinking about your performance. And I think maybe some quantitative but also qualitative data, right? Data can be stories or examples as well. So just, as you're thinking back, right, think about the values. When was it an example of a time that I was really innovative and used the definitions of our values that we provide you? If you can get objective data, that's awesome. Not everybody can, but if you can, you should try to do that, right? Maybe you count the number of times that you received an appreciation email, right, related to innovation, and you share those with during your appraisal. Also looking at significant events, maybe, I mean, in the IT world, right, we have, unfortunately, right, some significant events. I'm facilitator on duty this week, so maybe something's going to come up tonight. It's a full moon, healthcare, you never know. Maybe something comes up tonight that is a bad deal, but I work through that in a good way, right? So I would use that as a significant event to share with my director. And then also just wanted to really remind ourselves that behavior is performance, right? So your actions, the words you say, how you say them, your interactions with other people, those are really some data points that are performance, right? We've all probably heard the saying that if your highest performer has a bad attitude, they're maybe not adding the most value on your team. So you want to look at your behavior too, and maybe there's something there that you identify as you do really well, or maybe you need to work on your listening or whatever it might be. The other thing, again, just honing in on these lessons learned or opportunities for improvement. And then also looking at the data from a big picture. So trying to think of, if I could summarize this last year in maybe a couple sentences, this last year went really well. I grew in these areas, and next year I'm going to get way better at XYZ, right? Trying to think in maybe a bigger picture to develop that core message. I don't know about you, but when you're writing that appraisal, it can get kind of lengthy. And if you take a break, you want to come back and you want there to be some alignment between where you started and where you ended up. Next slide, we wanted to, just kind of go into how you write that review. So you've done your reflection, you're in a really good headspace to kind of look at the data and reflect. Now you want to take that core message of the last year and focus on that as you're writing, right? How do I outline my performance in the values and in my job description to really support what I think my performance looked like this last year? And so maybe some of the data you collected, maybe you don't include it all, right? Depending on how much data you have. And then also sharing experiences. Like I said, it's almost in a way like a job interview, right? Tell me about a time. One of the things that I tend to see a lot, and maybe coach away from this, but be objective in how you rate yourself. If somebody tells me that they feel really innovative, and they should be a 3, right? Because I just feel like I'm really innovative. There's probably some more I'm looking for from a manager perspective, right? Of like, well, give me an example of when you brought forth a new idea or really searched for a better way, right? Looking at our innovation definition there. So try to avoid sharing those feelings and sticking with the facts. And then again, and I don't know, maybe there's a theme in what I'm sharing with you, but don't be afraid to use those mistakes as sort of a springboard to where you want to grow the next year. When I see somebody self-identifying a mistake that can then develop into a goal, to me, that's great self-awareness. And those are some of my highest performers. So just realize that there's a ton of growth you're exhibiting when you use maybe a mistake or a lesson learned to sort of justify your performance in an area, right? I think about accountability, teamwork, some of those things that really are displayed when you can be self-aware, reflect, and identify a plan. So now that we've kind of thought through the self-appraisal, Missy's going to talk to us a little bit about peer appraisals and how that works.
So the peer appraisals is another component of the performance appraisal process. They are not, so one of the questions we get asked every year, are peer appraisals required? Yes and no, depending upon your role within Nebraska medicine. So for nurses, they are required as part of our magnet designation. So all nurses at Nebraska medicine are required to have 2 peer appraisals completed by another nurse. While they're not always required for other colleagues within the organization, they are recommended. Depending upon what department or unit that you work in, your leader may or may not require them of you. When you're selecting your peer appraisals, it's really important to think about who you're going to ask to complete a peer appraisal on you. It's perfectly okay to ask a friend or somebody that you work really closely with, but ask yourself, is this person going to provide me with real, honest, constructive feedback? Feedback is important. Feedback is not negative. It can sometimes be felt negative, but every single one of us needs feedback in both our personal and professional lives to be able to continue to grow. So again, really think about, do you just want to ask your best friend that you work with day in and day out because you know they're gonna give you a 3 across the board, or are you going to ask somebody who's going to provide you with real meaningful feedback that you can really reflect upon and utilize in the next year for professional growth? The first step, and we're not going to get into real details of the actual process within Workday, but you would then invite a peer to complete your peer appraisals within Workday. A best practice that has been identified, I know at least within the inpatient units, has been to randomly assign. A lot of leaders will do a random peer assignment for all the reasons I just spoke about. So they're done randomly, so you know your closest coworker or your best friend isn't going to be, you're going to get the meaningful feedback. Oops, lost my. So if asked to complete a peer appraisal, what do we ask you to keep in mind? What's important to think about? Provide constructive professional feedback, really focus on specific examples and observations. When you're writing a peer appraisal, same thing with your, like when the leaders are writing appraisals, performance appraisal time is not the first time a topic should be discussed. In your peer appraisals, if you have feedback, whether it's positive or constructive, those conversations should have been had throughout the year, not just being brought up for the first time during performance appraisal times. As a leader or manager, I know I really value and rely upon the peer appraisals, especially for the areas that have 24/7 accountability. There's so much good work that happens that we don't see. And so I ask if you're asked to write a peer appraisal, really set aside some time to provide thoughtful input, because I promise you your leaders will really appreciate that. Just to share, colleagues are not able to view the ratings or the comments made by their peers. They are confidential, they are anonymous. If your peer does not have access in Workday, there is a hard copy. It's a Word document. It is located within the leader resources within My HR. And then once completed, you would submit that to that leader's or to your peer's leader or one up. The next part that I'm going to talk about is the goals section. Again, goals are not required for every role within Nebraska medicine, and for different leadership levels, there's different types of goals. Today, I'm just going to talk about the nursing goals. So if you are a nurse, again, we are required as nurses as part of our magnet designation to include at least one professional development goal within our annual performance appraisals. So think of SMART goals. They have to be measurable. They have to be specific. We have to have a timeline in which we want to complete these. So just some examples of professional development type goals, or I want to obtain my specialty certification by the end of fiscal year 23. I will join a hospital-based committee. Maybe I want to become cross-trained to a different department. I want to be a preceptor to new staff, new students, things like that. And then as part of the discussion or with the goals, so when you're having the conversation, either as a manager with your employee or as the employee with your manager, really be prepared to talk about your previous year's goals. Goals should be reviewed during the annual performance appraisal meeting. Conversations around, was the goal met? If not, why not? If not, is this goal still important to you? Do we still want to work towards this goal? Did you have struggles? What action steps did you take? How can I, as your leader, help support you in achieving these goals? And then also part of that conversation is going to be about the goal that you selected for this current year. How do you plan to achieve this goal, and how can I support you? And then throughout the year, during one-to-one meetings with your people or with your leader or manager, part of that one-to-one discussion should always circle back to the goal that you're actively working on. That helps keep you as the peer accountable, and then it helps keep the leader kind of in the know. Have you started? How close are you to achieving this goal? Do you need help? Can I help identify resources for you to help you get to that goal? And then if there's any leaders, managers on the call, some tips on how to prepare for the one-to-one discussion. So most departments have some sort of metrics, whether they're quality metrics, productivity metrics, that all staff should be aware throughout the year. So review your unit metrics. Did you achieve them? Did you not achieve them? And those should be included within the performance appraisal. As the leader preparing, be sure to review self-appraisal comments and peer appraisal comments. You can learn a lot, like I said earlier, from peer comments and self-appraisals that you maybe as a leader you weren't aware about. When there's some departments that have 100+ employees, it's nearly impossible to know every piece that maybe they were involved in the community, or they were nominated for a specific award, or they received a patient compliment. So many different things that we as leaders really get from the self and the peer appraisals. And I know Brandon talked about the self appraisals, but again, really spend the time. This is your time to let us know, or make it be known, what you did, what you accomplished. Review then the colleagues' goals before you meet with them from the previous year, so you as the leader are prepared to have the conversation around their goals. And then again, we're recognizing performance and behaviors over the last 12 months. And then once the manager or the leader has all components of that performance appraisal put together, their perspective and feedback has been shared, the final appraisal should be submitted to the colleague in Workday at least 2 to 3 days prior to you having that one-to-one sit-down meeting with them, so they have time to thoroughly review. And that just by doing that, it allows them to prepare questions that they might want to ask you during that one-to-one conversation, and it just really helps to facilitate that conversation a little bit better. And then also throughout, I didn't include this, but I think an important point is, I know I get asked a lot of times, what can I do? Like, what are you looking for? How can I get a 3? Or how can I improve my score better? That can also be a part of that one-to-one performance appraisal meeting. Help identify to the colleague, opportunities for next year where they can score even higher.
Awesome. Great job, Missy. I do think, so much of this, right, is we are all achievers, right, in some way, shape, or form, right? The culture we live in, we want to do our best, we want to be helpful, and so we have this rating scale, right, that we're all evaluated on. So I think what's important is that when the organization says a level 2 is really great performance, we mean that, right? We're not just it's not like your parent telling you that you're our favorite child. This is like the organization really we used to have 5 levels, and we said, well, what do we really care about as an organization? And we've gone down to 3 because we really do believe that a 2 is really, really great performance. We know that most of our job descriptions are really complex. We don't really have any easy jobs in this organization. So just hear me when I say, at least from my perspective and for the organization, a level 2 really is a killer job, I think. So you should be proud if you get a level 2, although that's hard for many of us, right? So as you're looking at these, I would say if you really want to be at a level 3, have the conversation with your supervisor or one up about what does that look like on this team. Review your job description, help create benchmarks if you don't have it. But as we're looking at this, ultimately, right? So level 2 is really fantastic performance. We have another slide. Missy and I will kind of share our different perspectives on what's a level 3. But let's say you're a level 1. Just know that we still value you as an employee too. And we have a lot of tools that we could use to help coach and guide to get you to where you need and want to be. So I would just say if for some reason you were to get a level 1, there's still a place for you here in that category. We want to have those conversations and support you in whatever you need to do to get back up to a level 2. So as we look at what's a level 3, we have if you go to the next slide, just some different thoughts. And to me, it's going to be kind of based on your job description a little bit, right? So your job description is going to guide your responsibilities at the organization. So for folks on my team, I'm really looking for specific project metrics, right? Where we can say we've actually had an improvement and here's the data that suggests why. I'm looking for folks that have presented at some external conferences to really spread the Nebraska medicine, knowledge across the world, right? That's our mission. And then really it's that consistency is the other piece. I think it's not just, one time we did really great, but have we consistently elevated that standard? And then a couple other things on this list for me, I think coaching, are you coaching others, right? You've sort of reached really high potential in your job. Are you taking time to maybe mentor and coach other people that are newer on the team? Maybe you're helping with onboarding, maybe you're serving as a resource to your peers. And maybe you're just being really helpful to other people that reach out for whatever reason. So I would also be curious, Missy, your thoughts. What does this look like for you?
So the word that really sticks out to me on this slide is consistency. Just like what Brandon said, not looking, I did this one time or I did this one whatever, but consistency is key. I have never given anybody a solid 3 or a perfect 3 down the board. None of us are perfect. I look for very specific examples. Again, why I heavily rely on self and peer appraisals. If you've got the specific examples, yes, I want to give you credit for that. But some things and again, I'm from an inpatient nursing environment, but meeting our quality metrics. How did you participate? How did you help the team achieve our outcomes? We also have individual metrics that each nurse is kind of scored or graded on. Consistently mentors others and things like accountability. You seek out opportunities. As an example I think of, if you seek out and want to become cross-trained, maybe cross-trained to the ICU or cross-trained to pediatrics, because then we're thinking now more big picture, I can be more of a resource to the entire organization and not just within my own unit or department. Those that obtain specialty certification, to me, that really demonstrates going above and beyond and wanting to become an expert in your area. And with that being said, the inpatient nursing units have really specific benchmarks. And let's say one of my staff has their specialty certification, that might on our benchmarks indicate a potential 3 under accountability. But then I also have to step back and look at behaviors. If I have a nurse who is specialty certified, but we have attendance issues or missed education or negativity, whatnot, that's where the behavior becomes just as important as kind of the technical aspects of the job. Maybe they've implemented a new process within their department. Something on this unit, I had a bedside nurse implement the walking program. That's something that's gone across the country because she's then presented at conferences. If you submit an abstract and you present at a national, regional, local conference. Versatility, somebody who can care for patients across adult, pediatric, all levels of care, being able as a staff nurse, being a leader on the unit to a group of younger nurses, leading through emergent situations, presenting to larger audiences. Staff nurses have the opportunity. Maybe they come to present at a forum for you guys sometime, or quality patient safety report out, things like that. There's a lot of things, chairing hospital organizations or councils and committees, lots and lots of opportunities to really elevate your rating. And I always share with my team that these opportunities, there's so many of them, but it's up to you to seek out those opportunities and to really reach and strive for that.
Yeah. Hey, Missy, before we go to the next slide, I'd love to hear you and Brandon comment on the question in the chat for self-appraisals from a manager's perspective. Can you discuss what steps you take if you get one where the ratings don't match the explanations? Like, for example, they rated all threes and only gave, like, for example, a one sentence explanation. Just as managers, how you handle that.
It happens quite frequently. I mean, from my perspective anyways, and that's why, I always send a big communication out at the beginning of performance appraisal time. I kind of highlight this, like, I want you to put forth the effort. I do rely upon you. If you really want the credit, I don't know everything that you do. So if somebody scores themselves a 3 but doesn't give any explanation, I look at peer comments. I know a great deal about my staff. I'm going to grade or score them fairly. It doesn't mean just because they gave themselves all 3 that they deserve all 3s, and that's part of the conversation. And on the flip side, I have a lot of really high accountable employees that kind of downgrade themselves. And where I feel it's appropriate, fair, I know what they've done, I score them up because that's what they deserve. But it's about having that open, honest conversation and communication and encouraging them, take the time, put forth the effort into what you've done and accomplished over the last year.
Yeah, I'm going to say something funny, but it's a really serious thing. I say, show me the money, right? Show me the money, Jerry, right? Because ultimately, like, I'll give you credit for what examples and data that you have. But if it's just a one sentence about how you feel, then that's tough, right? To rate somebody based on that. So I will say a couple things. These conversations, it can get kind of heated, right? This is a crucial conversation that you're having with somebody about, like, here's the last year, here's how you're kind of scoring out. So I would say an acronym I like to use is feel, felt, found. So, I understand how you feel. I felt frustrated too. And here's what I found when I looked at the data, right? And so to kind of say, I have had in the past, people have rated themselves a 3, they didn't provide the example. And I said, if you can provide the example, I'm happy to level up with you on the rating. I just don't have access to that. And they showed me the data and it justified a level 3. I think maybe more upstream things that we could be better at is Missy mentioned the benchmarks. So like if your department maybe doesn't have benchmarks, that's really helpful. And that makes it really clear for people what they need to do to achieve those various ratings. And then the other thing that I know people do, because I used to do this, is some people just rate themselves a 3 because they want to see what, like they kind of, they're like putting it on you, the manager, to rate them lower, right? And so I used to do that all the time. I'm so sorry to the people that had to do my evals, but so I would just say, like Missy said, it's a conversation. And then also to really look out as a huge call out for the people that underrate themselves. I don't know. I think pandemic world and just in our culture, we're really hard on ourselves. So I think that's a harder thing because you really want to find the data for them sometimes. So just to eliminate bias, which is something we didn't go in depth here, but anyway, I'll stop there. How about that, Molly? I have so many thoughts on this.
Brandon, is this one you?
I can be, yeah. So I think this is just to outline the discussion, and I think we went into detail here as you're thinking about the performance over the last year or whatever that performance period is, right? Sometimes depending on calendar years, we have had a couple that were over a year. And then really looking at what does the next year look like, and as we've mentioned several times, just staying curious. I think on both sides, right? If you're the person doing the appraisal or receiving your appraisal, stay curious. And I would also suggest if somebody has an example or a comment about performance, and like ask questions, right? Say, oh, that's an interesting, I missed that example. How could I do that better this next year? And then obviously the process in Workday. And what I would say is if you are curious about how you're doing now, like it's never, best time to plant a tree was 500 years ago, and the second best time is today, right? So next one-on-one you have with your one-up, ask them, hey, I'm curious, how am I doing? Here's what I think. What do you think? Because those conversations should be occurring more frequently, probably than they are today across, at least my team. I know I could do better at that.
Before I go into the timelines, I just want to point out the chat if you have not read it. I really appreciate that everyone is sharing ideas of what they've done to kind of help themselves draft their self-appraisal. I do some of these things as well. So, I'm going to point it out, Amanda, this is so good. I use my I value you cards I received throughout the year when filling out my appraisals. Sometimes you do things that are just a big help and you think it's just every day for you, but it's important to review those accolades. And it could be an I value you card, an email you get, just anything that is sent your way. And then Amy Vasek, thank you for sharing. This is another good one. It's you just keep a running list of things you've accomplished throughout the year, along with kudos and constructive feedback. So good best practices. I love that people are sharing these. So I put a note in there. Yeah, continue to share best practices as we go through the next 2 slides, and then we'll wrap up. But I thought I would mention some of the timelines, and these are dates based off of previous years. So all of this is under consideration. Because our appraisals launch on July 1st, the work group that we lead kind of decides these dates, and then we lift them up to the chiefs and compensation, and they review and approve them. But generally, this is what it looks like around July 1st. That's when we all receive our self-appraisals and the peer appraisal link to either give those or send those out. You have about 2 weeks. Sometimes we've done 3 weeks, but about 2-3 weeks to write your self-appraisal, finish any peer appraisals that were sent your way. That allows for your leaders to deliver your performance appraisal from July 15th through August 31st. So that's, the time frame that we give. And then the system usually closes at the end of August. Around that first pay period, your merit increases take effect in October, and then you see it on your paycheck that second pay period. So that's generally the timeline every year. Obviously during COVID, if you were here, we had an 18-month review and that wasn't fun. So we're hoping to never go back to that again. But we had to be flexible with what was going on in our world. And then the next slide, Missy, I think just highlights where some tools and resources are. We have a lot of tools. We have a lot of resources. I'm recording this one, for example, today for colleagues. But the HR checklist gets emailed to leaders every Monday. During performance appraisal time, we usually have all those key dates. So either ask your leader if something's coming up, or if you're a leader, be sure to share that down. Under My HR, there's a leader resources link. So if you are a supervisor or above on this call, there's a ton of detail out there and resources to help draft, help write, screenshots, how to use the system. But we also have a Workday link for those of us that aren't in leadership, where we can go out, and it has some tools. And I think that's probably where we'll throw this recording, but we'll confirm. And then you can always submit a My HR ticket. There's somebody in the service center that can help, or your HR business partner, which your leader typically knows who that is if you're not familiar. And then I believe the next slide is just what questions do we have, and comments, and just feedback. Did we cover what you guys were looking for as part of this?
No, I thought this was a really great presentation. So thank you guys for doing this. So I know you guys talk about best practices, and I thought this was something unique that my team does. So we talked a lot about that 1, 2, 3. Where do I rate myself? Am I being exceptional? Am I meeting standards? And so this is something I've never been a part of, but our team actually collaborated directly with our leader to define what is a 3. What does a 3 look like in accountability for us in our division, and really setting those expectations. And now, granted, I know it can get a little subjective at times, but that I think really helped guide our team in understanding that 1, 2, 3 rating a little bit better. So maybe something that could be adopted elsewhere too.
That's a great idea. Amy, who's your leader?
Natalie McCready.
Okay.
And we're a
Kudos.
small group, and yeah, and so, there's only 6 of us, so it's very easy to get our feedback, but I understand those maybe with 80 employees, that might be a little bit more difficult, but it's just something that's really, I think, helped us and guided us and understanding where we are, from our year to year.
Hey, just a quick note on that conversation that Amy's talking about pairs so nicely with developing a culture charter, right? Trying to figure out what is our team doing here? What purpose are we serving? And then like, how do we specifically in our role display, innovation? I love that, Amy. Thanks for sharing.
And I'd like to echo that. This is Melissa Lederer. We did the same for my department. We're very highly specialized roles that kind of live in our little silos, but we took a little nod from our inpatient roots and some of the outpatients that have done that for even bigger staff to say, what does it mean to be a 1, 2, or 3? And it was really valuable for my staff as they reflected on their own. And then also because we're nurses, we look at our peers. And so for them to say, yeah, I know that this person does these things, and that makes them a 2 or a 3. And so it was really valuable for us as well.
Thank you. Any other pending comments or questions from this group? Because as I look around and I see 34 people participating in this call, which is wonderful, I also look at Brandon and Missy and say, what can we include in what's coming out for training for leaders and colleagues for when we kick it off? So if there's any feedback from this group as we think about when we start meeting, which will be April 1st-ish. I have a lot of ish dates. Any feedback from this group? How we could help better support the whole organization on this topic? It was just that good? Well, if we don't have any other questions, Brandon or Missy, do you have any ending thoughts that are mind-blowingly good?
Well, so I do have one thing I would say. If something we said, or if you think we can be of value by sharing experience with you more, I would just say reach out. I'm happy to meet. Some of this stuff is really hard, right? So like, how do you rate somebody a 2 when they think they're a 3 and maybe they've been a 3 for 5 years, right? How do you have that conversation? So I would be happy to meet with people, and I'm sure Missy would too. And then I would just add, or maybe close with another John Maxwell quote. So a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So even if you're not in a quote unquote leadership role, we are all leaders here. So I think, if you have ideas for best practices or benchmarks, or you want to just talk to your one-up about performance and what that looks like, lead in that space. Just lead where you are, and be the person that starts those conversations in your division, because that helps the whole organization get better.
Love it. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Missy. You guys did a great job.
I do want to say thank you guys as well. So this is Jerry Stone, by the way. So this is something we've been thinking about doing for quite some time, and just to provide a little bit additional, something as a resource for people to do performance appraisals, because they can be confusing and they can be stressful and all those different things. And you guys provide a lot of great information I think we can take out to everyone. We may have a follow-up session. I need to go back with our group and just talk about what we want to do if we do a follow-up. But this has been great so far. If no one has anything else, though, once you leave this room, you can leave the meeting. We're not going to do a come back together session or anything like that. So this is it for today, but do appreciate everyone joining.
I just say one more comment, looking at the chat about the templates. I am part of the acute care performance appraisal group, and that's a group, we are the ones, we created our own benchmarks or the templates. So I'm happy to share. Again, they're nursing, they're more inpatient acute care focused, but if people want examples, and we have like our office assistants, happy to share those. But that group is comprised of representation from all of the different acute care areas. So again, just reach out to me. I'm happy to share examples of what the acute care environment templates look like.
Yeah, I think there's templates in peri-op and ambulatory as well. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, lots of kudos to Brandon and Missy for facilitating today. So I'm going to jump off. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.